The black stranger who helped me when my husband wouldn't even pick up my call. Disclaimer. This content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought I'd be in that position. Sitting on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, heart racing and tears fighting to escape. I must have called him 5 times that evening. 5 calls. Not a single one answered. And no, this wasn't the first time. Lately, silence had become my husband's preferred language. But that day was different. Something inside me cracked. I remember staring at the screen hoping his name would pop up. A text. A call. Even a one-word reply. But nothing. Just an empty screen and a deeper emptiness growing inside me. I felt abandoned. Not just physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We had been married for over 8 years, but lately, I felt like a stranger in my own home. And when things got tough, when I needed someone the most, he vanished into silence. So I left. Not permanently, just enough to breathe. I walked without a clear destination, lost in a fog of hurt and confusion. That's when I saw him. A tall man, dark-skinned, sitting quietly on the edge of the park bench near the corner store. He looked up. Our eyes met. And for a moment I felt seen. Not in a romantic way. Not even in a comforting way. But seen like someone actually noticed I wasn't okay. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't flirt. He just said, "You okay?" 3 words. But they were more than my husband had offered in weeks. It's strange how a stranger can feel safer than the one you built your life with. That one conversation led to another. And another. And soon, he became someone I confided in, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. He didn't fix my life. But he reminded me I still mattered. And sometimes when you're at your lowest, that's everything. But as I started to rely on him more, I noticed things. Things that didn't quite add up about him. Who was this man really? Why did he always show up when I needed someone most? And how did he know so much about me without ever asking too much? I thought I was just being paranoid. Until one night he said something that made my heart stop. Before I tell you what it was, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt more understood by a stranger than your own partner? Would you trust someone who steps in when the person closest to you keeps walking away? Let's talk. Because what happened next changed everything. That night after he said those words that felt like he had reached into my past, I couldn't sleep. I replayed our entire conversation in my head, wondering if I had ever mentioned that detail before. But I hadn't. I was sure of it. So how did he know? Earlier that day, I had broken down while talking to him, sitting on that same bench beneath the flickering streetlight. I told him about the fights. How my husband had started sleeping in the guest room. How he'd eat dinner after I'd gone to bed just to avoid sitting across from me. How I sometimes whispered good night to a man who never replied. I didn't share everything, but I had said enough for him to understand I was hanging by a thread. But the moment he said, "You've always been the one to fix everything, haven't you? Even when you were 10. My whole body froze. I hadn't told him that. Not about my childhood. Not about how I used to hide my parents' fights from my younger brother. How I used to clean up the messes, cover for them, calm everyone down like it was my job to keep peace in a war zone. No one knew that, not even my husband. So how did this man, this stranger, know? I didn't confront him. Not then. I just laughed it off. Acted like maybe I had mentioned it earlier and forgotten. But my mind kept spinning. Who was he really? He told me his name was Daryl. Said he had moved into the neighborhood recently. Said he worked nights and liked the quiet during the day. But now, even his calm voice felt too polished, too intentional. I started to think back. Every conversation we'd had. Every detail he had shared about himself. It was all surface level. He listened a lot. But he never talked much. Still, I kept going back. And that's what's confusing even to me. Because even with all those questions, I felt safer with him than I did at home. Is that wrong? My husband still hadn't noticed I was slipping away. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he thought I wouldn't leave. That I'd just keep holding on like always. But things were changing. The silence between us had grown so loud, I couldn't hear my own thoughts anymore. And the one man who seemed to actually see me, really see me, might not be who he says he is. Now tell me, if someone knew your secrets without you ever telling them, would you run? Or would you ask them how they knew? Drop your answer in the comments. Because trust me, it's about to get even more complicated. A few days passed and I didn't see Daryl. I tried not to overthink it, but a part of me missed his presence more than I expected. I still hadn't confronted him about that strange comment, but the way it haunted me proved he had gotten under my skin. Meanwhile at home, things were only getting colder. My husband, Daniel, had started coming home even later, sometimes after midnight.
No explanations. No apologies.
Just silence or the occasional shrug if I dared ask where he'd been. And I kept thinking, if I disappeared, would he even notice? I tried to bring it up gently. I told him I felt disconnected. I asked if something was wrong. He just looked at me with that same tired expression and said, "You always make everything so dramatic." And that was it. No follow-up. No concern. Just the flick of the TV remote and the end of the conversation. That night I went back to the bench. I wasn't even sure if Daryl would show up. But he did. As if he'd been waiting for me. He sat down beside me without saying a word. And after a while he asked, "Does he know you cry when you do the dishes?" That question hit me like a punch. I had cried over the sink just 2 nights ago. Quietly wiping my face with the same dish towel I was using to dry the plates. There was no way he could have known that. No one saw me. I finally asked him, "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He just said, "Sometimes the people closest to us stop seeing us. But that doesn't mean we're invisible." His words were comforting but also chilling. Why did he always say exactly what I needed to hear, before I even said anything? At the same time, something strange started happening. My husband suddenly became attentive. He started bringing me coffee in the morning. He offered to make dinner one night. He even suggested we go away for a weekend trip. It all felt so sudden, so unnatural. Like he knew he had to do something, like he was trying to cover up something. Or distract me. And then I noticed it. A message on his phone from an unknown number. The preview just said, "She's asking questions." What do I say? Now I didn't know who to trust. My husband, who had shut me out for months but was suddenly changing overnight. Or the black stranger who seemed to know my soul, but kept his own past hidden? What would you do in my place? Is it worse to be loved by someone who hides the truth? Or comforted by someone who might not be who he says he is? Comment your thoughts and stay with me. Because the truth? It's just starting to surface. I stared at that message on Daniel's phone for a long time. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake him. He was in the shower when it buzzed and something in me just acted. I hadn't planned on snooping, but the message had popped up on the lock screen like it was begging to be seen. She's asking questions. What do I say? I didn't recognize the number. No name, no photo. Just those 8 words that flipped my world upside down. I put the phone back exactly how I found it and walked out of the room. My mind was spinning. Who was she? What questions was I asking that had someone texting my husband for instructions? And why did I feel like I was in the middle of something much bigger than I realized? Later that night, I went to the park again. I didn't even want to talk to Daryl. I needed to. But he wasn't there. I waited. Minutes passed. An hour. The bench stayed empty, and the air around me felt different. Like something was off. The next day, Daniel surprised me with plane tickets. A weekend getaway to the mountains. He smiled like everything was perfectly normal. "Just the 2 of us," he said. "Let's reset." I should have been happy. Months of coldness, suddenly replaced with warmth and effort. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt cornered. Like I was being moved around in someone else's game. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't love driving him. It was fear. Fear of me finding out something I wasn't supposed to know. So I called the number. The one from the text. My hands shook as it rang. Once. Twice. Then it clicked. And a voice answered, low, calm, familiar. It was Daryl. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask who I was. He just said, "You weren't supposed to see that." That's when I knew I had been lied to. Not just by my husband, but by both of them. But why? What were they hiding? How did they even know each other? And what was this all really about? My marriage, my breakdown, my sudden friendship with a stranger who somehow knew everything about me. I started to feel like none of it was an accident. Like I had been led to that park bench. Like someone wanted me to break. Or maybe wake up. Tell me in the comments if both the man who loved you and the man who understood you were part of the same secret. Would you still trust either of them? Because I was about to find out the truth, and I wasn't sure I was ready. I stood frozen with the phone pressed to my ear, Daryl's voice echoing in my mind. You weren't supposed to see that. My mouth went dry. I didn't even know what to say. He didn't offer any explanation and I didn't ask. I just hung up. My chest was tight, like someone had wrapped invisible hands around my lungs. That single moment had shattered whatever comfort or safety I thought I had in either of them. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the ceiling trying to connect the pieces. Daryl knew things he shouldn't. Daniel had suddenly turned into the man I wished he had been months ago. And now they were somehow linked. Two men on opposite ends of my life, tied together by a lie I hadn't uncovered yet. The next morning Daniel was cheerful. He brought me breakfast in bed, kissed my forehead, and talked about how excited he was for our weekend trip. I tried to play along, but something in me had shifted. I didn't feel like his wife anymore. I felt like a woman being handled, carefully, quietly, like a threat. So I did something I never thought I would. I followed him. He told me he was going to the gym before packing, but I wasn't buying it. I waited a few minutes, then got in my car and stayed a few cars behind. He didn't go to the gym. He drove across town, past neighborhoods we never visited, and pulled into a small house with peeling paint and no mailbox. He got out, knocked twice, and the door opened. It was Daryl who answered. My heart dropped. Daniel didn't even look surprised. He walked in like he'd been there before, like it was normal. I couldn't breathe. Every cell in my body wanted to burst into that house and demand answers. But I didn't. I stayed in the car and watched, praying they didn't see me. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then Daniel came out alone. He wasn't smiling anymore. As he drove away, I waited. And then I did the unthinkable. I walked up to the house and knocked. But it wasn't Daryl who opened the door this time. It was a woman. Mid-30s. Calm. Cold eyes. She looked at me and said, "We didn't think you'd get this far." I stepped back. My voice barely came out. "Who are you people?" She smiled almost kindly. "It's not about who we are. It's about what you were never supposed to remember." Now I was no longer just questioning their loyalty. I was questioning my reality. What would you do if your entire life suddenly felt like a setup? Tell me in the comments, because whatever this is, it's only getting darker from here. I stepped inside slowly, my heart pounding as if it already knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The woman didn't try to stop me. She simply turned and walked toward a small table where folders were stacked, neatly labeled and dated. I looked around the room. Not much furniture, just a couch, a dusty lamp, and photos on the wall. But not family photos. They were pictures of people I didn't recognize until I did. One of them was me. Another was Daniel. And there, in the corner, Daryl. Everything inside me screamed to run, but I stayed. I needed answers. The woman looked at me and finally spoke clearly. This wasn't about love or betrayal. This was about observation, memory, behavior. I couldn't make sense of her words. So she explained. Daryl wasn't some random stranger. He was part of a psychological program, one my husband had secretly enrolled me in without my knowledge. An experimental form of therapy disguised as coincidence. They called it deep intervention. Supposedly, it was meant to help people reconnect with suppressed emotions, break destructive patterns, and face old traumas by introducing a catalyst, someone who would mirror their unspoken pain. Daryl had been assigned to me. My marriage had fallen apart, and instead of therapy or real conversation, Daniel had agreed to this experiment. He thought it would save me, or maybe save us, but he didn't tell me because it was more effective when the subject didn't know. I felt sick, violated, manipulated, but also strangely free, because what Daryl helped me realize, whether he was playing a role or not, was that I had spent years waiting for someone to choose me, to show up for me, and in doing so I had abandoned myself. I left the house without saying another word. I didn't confront Daniel. I didn't yell or cry. I just packed my bag and left. A few weeks later I started over in a new place. Quiet town. Small apartment. Peace. No experiments. No secrets. Just me learning how to be whole without anyone pulling the strings. And Daryl? He never reached out again. I don't even know if what he shared was real or scripted. But I'll always be thankful for one thing. He woke me up. Now I want to ask you. If someone lied to help you heal, would you forgive them? Would you want to know the truth? Or live in the comfort of the lie? Comment below how you felt about the ending. And if you'd want to see a sequel. Because this story may be over, but healing? That journey has just begun. I stood in front of the woman trying to steady my breathing. Her words echoed in my head. It's about what you were never supposed to remember. And in that quiet something clicked. A memory I had buried long ago started to surface. A counseling session I once attended years before Daniel and I were even married. It was part of a trial program, something I dropped out of after one session because it felt too invasive. I had signed forms, vaguely worded ones I never really read. I walked away thinking nothing of it. But apparently someone hadn't walked away from me. That forgotten signature had opened a door. And Daniel had used it without my knowledge. He wasn't trying to hurt me, at least not intentionally. He believed I had built walls so high no ordinary conversation could reach me. He thought bringing in someone like Daryl, someone trained to subtly challenge me, might break through. What he didn't understand was that the moment he let someone else pretend to care for me, he lost the right to actually do it himself. I left that house without looking back. I didn't confront either of them. I didn't need more explanations. What mattered was how I felt, and I felt betrayed. But I also felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, the confusion was gone. The lies had been exposed. And in the ruins of all that pretending, I could finally see what was real. I filed for separation 2 weeks later. Daniel didn't fight it. I think deep down he knew he'd broken something that couldn't be put back. As for Daryl, I never saw him again. Maybe he moved on to another case. Or maybe he really did care and just couldn't face me anymore. I'll never know for sure. Now, months later, I live alone in a small apartment with big windows and quiet mornings. I started writing again. Not just journaling, but really writing stories, reflections, the kind of truth that once scared me. And I'm learning that healing doesn't always come from someone else swooping in. Sometimes it comes from standing still long enough to hear your own voice again. So now I ask you, was what Daniel did love or control? Was Daryl just following orders? Or did he actually see me? Comment below, I'd love to know what you think. And if you'd want to see what happens next in my journey, let me know. Because sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another.